we're going to stay in this room. Normally we walk down to the other room, but I'm not going to unless the door down. We're going to talk about Paul, which is the next room down. I'm going to make this really quick, because I apologize for the sheet. I'm going to tell you guys about Paul. Paul was a maintenance engineer who worked on the property from 1995 until 2005. We usually go into the other room, and we call it Paul's room. The same way that Lucy never lived in this room. Paul never lived or worked out of that room, but that is the majority of where we get our activity from Paul is in the other room, just across the hall. Paul, yeah. That's great. Just like you said, I'm a point with that. Oh, yeah.
She might be.
Paul.
There he goes.
Okay, I'm having chicken.
Oh.
Like a man. I got it. Paul was a maintenance engineer from 1995 till 2005. He was in his late 50s, single, very gruff individual. I'm sure everyone knows someone in their life like this. But Paul was the type of man who liked things done his way. Paul was the type of guy who was a very gruff individual, and he told you if you weren't doing things Paul's way, that was the right way to do things, according to Paul. Paul worked primarily nights. So Paul would come in about 11 o'clock at night. He would work till about 7 o'clock in the morning. Paul had a number of different jobs. He would walk the property. We actually have a curfew on property at 11 o'clock. It doesn't mean the guests have to be back in their rooms at 11. Any events that would have to take place on the property have to be done by 11 o'clock. So any weddings, any concerts, anything like that has to be done at 11. So when Paul would come on property, he would walk the property, make sure all the buildings were locked up after the event. He'd go to the staff dorms, make sure the staff was back in their rooms, make sure the buildings were locked up, that people weren't married they weren't supposed to be in. He would also walk the halls of the main hotel, check for any room service dishes, check for any dirty laundry, things like that. But when he would do his rounds, this is primarily where Paul would come back to. He based himself out of the concert hall. February of 2005, Paul was out in front of this building. He was shoveling snow, and he started to have a heart attack. It was about 4 o'clock in the morning. At 4 o'clock in the morning in February, guys, there would have been about 4 people on property. There would have been Paul, one person at the front desk, probably someone in the kitchen prepping for breakfast, maybe a houseman. Other than that, there wouldn't have been anyone here. So when Paul started to have a heart attack, he knew he didn't have a lot of time. So he got in his truck. He tried to drive himself to the hospital. He never made it. He actually passed away. They found him in his truck the next morning. Paul is the other spirit that is here on the property with us. Paul is different in the fact of Lucy, that Lucy is here because this is where this is where Lucy made home. This is where Lucy feels comfortable. This is her home, and this is where she loves to be. Paul is here because he is still doing his job. Paul loved the Stanley. Paul did his job extremely well, and he was very proud of it. And that's the reason Paul's back. Paul is active, like Lucy, but in different ways. Lucy shuts the door, or we believe that to be Lucy that shuts the door. We've never had her open it. No, she's always just shut it. Paul is different in the fact that we've actually heard Paul's voice come from Paul's room. On several occasions, we've been in here doing ghost hunts and things like that, where we've heard a man's voice coming from Paul's room. We've actually had a gentleman on a ghost hunt who was down here investigating. He was walking down the hallway, and he got right in the front of Paul's room across the hall, and he heard a very loud, rough voice come out of Paul's room that said, "Get out." His name was Scott, and that's exactly what he did. People during the ghost hunt were upstairs. We heard him running, literally, from downstairs. When he got back upstairs, he was white, completely pale. He was shaking. It took him a couple of 2 or 3 minutes before he could start talking about what happened to him. We believe that to be Paul. The reason why is because Paul's still here doing his job. Every event on property still has to be done by 11 o'clock unless they get permission, other than the ghost hunts. The ghost hunts are the only ones one that have permission to be here past 11 o'clock. We have the right to be here till 2. Honestly, I think it upsets Paul because Paul is still here. Paul's still doing his job, making sure the building's locked up, making sure people are out. Normally, when we experience Paul, it's after about 11 o'clock at night when we do our ghost hunts. We directly relate Paul to the character that we see, the ghost figure, the shadow figure, going up the back staircase and standing on the landing. From what we understand from people who worked here when Paul did, that was very, very common for Paul. He would be based out of this building. I have to believe that he was probably in his room across the way because the mechanical room being across from that. But he would walk up the back staircase, he would check over the concert hall building, make sure it was secure, and then he would turn around and walk back downstairs. We also believe that it's probably Paul that walks across the stage. I don't know why. We don't know why he's walking across the stage to the left-hand closet. I don't know if that's where he kept his tools. I'm not sure if at one point in time that was a little office of his. Now it's just full of piano and tables and chairs. So we're not sure why he's walking across that stage to the left-hand side, but we believe it to be him. We also believe that the gentleman who was upstairs standing on the floor, who was slightly asked to leave when he was lifted off his feet, was probably Paul. He was here night after night after night, past curfew, working.
A little bit faster.
When all of a sudden one night someone comes up behind him and they grab him around the waist and they pick him up, we think that that was probably Paul. Paul is verbal. So let's just say Paul was upstairs night after night after night while the guy was here standing on the floors. Maybe he was verbally telling the guy to get out like we've heard him say before. The guy couldn't have heard him because for one he had ear protectors on, for another he was standing on the floor. So let's just say Paul was trying to tell him to get out and the guy really couldn't hear him. So the guy is working until Paul finally has enough and says, I'm going to take things into my own hands. I don't know who you are, but you're not supposed to be here and it's past curfew, so I'm going to let you know that you're not supposed to be here. And he did, exactly. So we believe that to be Paul as well. Like I said, very active spirits. We do get a lot of participation from them. Paul actually usually acts on command, not all the time. Like I said, we've been in here many times over and over and over. We've asked Lucy to shut the door. She never does it on command. We can go into Paul's room, and we can try the flashlight technique. If anyone's familiar with that, Jason and Grant use that a lot on ghost hunters. But you take a mag light and screw the end of it to where if you set it down, if you tap it or just touch it barely, the light will flicker on. We do that in Paul's room quite a bit, where we go into Paul's room and we'll set a couple flashlights down and we'll ask Paul to say, Paul, can you turn this flashlight on for us? And he'll turn it on. And after about 15 seconds, we'll say, thanks, Paul. Can you turn it off? And he'll turn it off. Paul, can you turn this flashlight on for us? And he'll come over and he'll turn this flashlight on. 15 seconds later, we'll say, Paul, do you mind turning that off for us too? He'll turn that one off, and we'll go back and forth. Usually lasts about 5 or 6 minutes, and then it just kind of ends. But Paul will usually turn the flashlight for us. So he does cooperate. He is active when we're in there. So that's kind of the concert hall. That's the basics of it. I mean, it's like I said, it's an extremely active building. 9 out of 10 times when I leave a tour, I've got about 20 minutes between I drop you guys off and when my next tour starts. I always make sure Lucy's door's open when I leave. I'm usually the last one out. 9 out of 10 times when I leave, Lucy's door is open. When I come back 20 minutes later, the door's shut. Usually happens almost every time that we do that. Nights like this, I can pretty much guarantee that no one's going to be in this building between when we leave and when I come back with the next group. But you guys have already seen that the door's already shut. Right? So until we come up with another explanation, until we keep running tests, and we do continue to run tests, until we can come up with some explanation as to why the door's shut, I have to believe it's Lucy. That's my only explanation at this point.
You may have already said this, I'm sorry, but
no, go ahead.
How often, I mean, when you come down here with tours, how often does that happen?
It's very, very sporadic. You guys, the first tour in Lucy's room where it shut, we were over in the other room in Paul's room when it shut on us last tour. The first tour today, it didn't budge, it never did anything.
Wow.
So it's very tough to say how often it does it. We did a tour about, I'm trying to think the last time I did tours was about 2 weeks ago. The last time I did tours was about 2 weeks ago. And the first tour that I was on, the door shut twice. The second tour is set 5 times. The third tour is set 8 times. The last tour of the day is set 12 times within my tour. So every tour, it started setting more and more and more. So you never have any idea. I've been down here with tours before, and I'm like, close. So you don't ever have any clue. And those are the times people are just kind of crazy. So, yeah. So you document stuff like that right now? Yeah, we do. Over in tours, yeah, we write it down. Typically on anything I got it. So.
Does the frequency of the actual door shutting get more as the day progresses?
Yeah, like the last time I did tours a couple weeks ago, the door would shut, and that's what I was doing so often. Just like I'm doing with you guys, the door would shut, I'd grab the handle, I'd open it back up. 2 minutes later, the door would shut. I'd grab the handle, I'd open it back up, and just time after time after time after time, and just shut.
And what time of day, kind of like around the time
like
that we're right now?
Yeah, okay. Evening. Yeah, and that's why I come up with my theory, and that's kind of where I really started my theory on that was a couple of weeks ago when it just increased every single tour I brought in, it started shutting more and more and more and more. And I thought that before, but then after I did that a couple of weeks ago, I'm like, could it be? Maybe that's my own personal opinion of what I believe that it's right, but kind of what I know with it. Yeah.
I know you already said that when you've asked her before to shut the door and that it usually doesn't work, but could we try anyway?
Yeah. You want to ask her? You want me to?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Missy, can you please shut the door to show us you're here?
Turkey.
I'll make sure you won't take your chicken.
Turkey.
Your turkey. Your turkey.
All right, guys, it's time for help. We'll head back upstairs. So I appreciate everyone coming.
This will be the last one.